You're listening to Uptown Radio. It's Wednesday, December 8th. I'm Teja Polikonda.
And I'm Emily Russell. The disturbance in the supply chain has affected all of us at some point since the pandemic began. But how is it affecting our schools?
You don't think that the supply chain issue affects 5-year-olds, but it does.
As the MTA looks to make improvements through its $50 billion capital program, we take a look to see if they're making the platforms any safer.
Protective barriers at every platform would be the billions of dollars.
The modeling industry is getting transformed through the use of social media and becoming a more diverse place for all shapes, colors, and sizes.
So I want to kind of break that and to show that every type of an ethnicity is beautiful.
All that and more on Uptown Radio. But first, the news.
Live from NPR News, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Pfizer and its German partner BioNTech say new data show that 3 doses of their COVID-19 vaccine appear to boost antibody levels against the new Omicron variant of the coronavirus. But the companies say 2 doses may still protect an infected person from getting seriously ill. Dr. Anthony Fauci spoke to CNN about what scientists are learning about the risks posed by the Omicron variant.
There were 3 major unknowns. Is it much more transmissible than Delta? Does it elude or evade the immune response? And is it clinically more severe? And as the days and the weeks go by in real time, we're learning more and more. So the news we got last night and this morning about the effect of boosters does make me breathe a little bit better.
So far, the vast majority of rising infections and hospitalizations in the U.S. are Delta cases. While vaccinated people still face the risk of infection, they are less likely to get severely ill than unvaccinated people. But preliminary data out of South Africa suggests breakthrough infections are much more likely with Omicron. President Biden is reiterating his message to Russia that any further military escalation along the border with Ukraine will be met with strong economic sanctions. NPR's Windsor Johnston reports the warning comes a day after Biden spoke with Russian President Vladimir Putin about increasing fears of a possible invasion.
Speaking outside of the White House, President Biden said he's absolutely confident that Putin got the message that any further military action toward Ukraine would result in severe consequences.
Economic consequences like none he's ever seen or ever have been seen in terms of being imposed. He knows his immediate response was he understood that.
Putin has repeatedly warned that any expansion of NATO military infrastructure in Ukraine would be the red line for the Kremlin. Biden says diplomacy is the responsible way forward to avoid a crisis and that both sides have been in constant contact. Biden is scheduled to hold talks with the president of Ukraine later this week. Windsor Johnston, NPR News, Washington.
Officials in Oxford, Michigan say formal classes at Oxford High School won't resume until January at the earliest. Meanwhile, last funerals are being held this week for students who were killed in a deadly shooting. Here's NPR's Cheryl Corley.
Businesses like Sick Pizza in Oxford have helped raise thousands of dollars to help with costs for families. Co-owner Scott Taylor says he went to a neighboring high school.
We've always been huge rivals, and they're the Wildcats and we're the Dragons, and this week we're all Wildcats. And it's very important to me for Mealing to do something.
Funerals for 17-year-old Madison Baldwin and 16-year-old Tate Meir were held earlier. Cheryl Corley, NPR News, Oxford.
You're listening to NPR News.
Live from Columbia University, I'm Will Norris. This morning, striking Columbia student workers began a demonstration across the university's Morningside Heights campus. The strikers called on all students and professors to remain off campus today. They're negotiating for higher wages, improved health care coverage, and other demands. More on this later in the broadcast. The legal challenges to Mayor Bill de Blasio's vaccine mandates continue. A Staten Island attorney announced a class action lawsuit against the mayor's most recent order, which calls for all private sector workers in New York to get vaccinated. That order came Monday and would go into effect on December 27th, a few days before de Blasio leaves office. And yesterday, a judge approved a hearing for a hold on the mayor's previous order that all New York municipal workers get the vaccine. Mayor-elect Eric Adams returned home from a trip to Ghana. He left for the country last week for what he called a spiritual journey. As he prepares to take office in a month, Adams has not confirmed whether he'll uphold his predecessor's new private sector vaccine mandate. Today in a Lower Manhattan courthouse, Ghislaine Maxwell's criminal trial enters its 8th day. 3 accusers have testified that Maxwell facilitated abusive contact between them and Jeffrey Epstein since the trial began last week. Today, Epstein's former pilot took the witness stand. Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to 8 counts of sex trafficking for her alleged role in grooming girls for Epstein to abuse between 1994 and 2004. The prosecution said they intend to rest their case as early as tomorrow. A 50-foot Christmas tree outside the Fox News studios in Midtown went up in flames just after midnight last night. The man accused of starting the blaze is facing a number of charges. It's unclear what he used to start the fire. Mobile MTA service updates were down yesterday due to an Amazon server outage, but are active again today. It's overcast with a high in the low 40s today in New York. For Uptown Radio News, I'm Will Norris.
This is Uptown Radio. I'm Emily Russell.
And I'm Teja Palikonda. At 8 a.m. today, the student workers of Columbia began their shutdown of the Morningside Heights campus, urging all students not to attend classes, either in person or on Zoom, until 6 p.m. to show their support for their ongoing contract negotiations.
This is the 5th week of protests as the union and the university administration negotiate a collective bargaining agreement.
Earlier today, I spoke with union member Andre Petman. He's a 4th-year PhD student and has been working with the union since 2018. I asked him what caused the shutdown today.
The recent, I guess what you would describe as escalation or in an attempt to shut down the campus is really in response to the university's recent retaliation or threat of retaliation towards striking workers, that they will not receive their teaching appointments in the spring, and obviously there's no guarantee that they would receive one. This means that our entire livelihoods essentially are being threatened simply for exercising our legal right to strike.
Both NYU and Harvard have been having similar protests. They've seemed to come to agreements with their universities. Why can't Columbia reach the same?
Well, I mean, to be quite frank, I think it's Columbia's intransigence at the table and a complete unwillingness to really actually treat their workers fairly. For example, our ask for a neutral arbitration process when it comes to discrimination and harassment. The university is relatively intransigent on this topic. Compensation. The university has been pushing as much as they can to give us as little money as possible. They did not give us a 3% raise this year as they normally do. They refused to raise us to any sort of living wage in New York City, in spite of a variety of calculations one can provide to them. So essentially they're trying to be as austere, to use this sort of language, as possible in every sort of way to the detriment of student workers.
How have you or other students that have been striking for weeks now, haven't attended classes, may not have been going to work studies, how have they been faring financially?
I can't speak to everyone's financial situation, obviously, and it has been very difficult. It would be a misrepresentation to say it's that's easy to not get paid for 5 weeks when you already make so little. But we have many different ways that we're trying to support folks as best as we can, and I think things are going really well so far. I haven't checked today or yesterday. I've been very busy, but I think we've gone over 200K. And now I know that yesterday we received $6,000 in donations just yesterday. So the hardship fund is definitely growing. So I think that's really sort of energized a lot of folks as well to see that it's, even though it's being on strike for that many weeks is hard, that we have so much support from folks we don't even know, right? So.
Asking students to not attend class when they are attending a very expensive, prestigious university is a big ask. Do you find that students are still able to achieve what they came here to achieve?
And I feel for folks who have had 2 straight semesters of strikes. I feel for myself as an instructor who's had, not been able to meet with my students for 2 semesters, in a row for a certain period. But a lot of undergrads don't really understand what a graduate student does, or that they're not like a professionally trained instructor who gets paid quite a bit to do this, And so I think once you have these conversations with undergrads, they sort of realize that it's not really a sort of punishment, sort of like grad students taking out a certain kind of anger or using undergraduates as a pawn, right? I think they realize how sort of interconnected. I think that's been one of the most amazing parts of this strike, is that I think it's really we've had amazing support from undergraduates, and I think folks are realizing that just because when someone is called a graduate student, someone is called an undergraduate, that we're all people at the same university.
To wrap up with my final question, do you feel that you will reach the goal of having a contract by the end of the semester?
I hope so. If we hold the line and don't let the university pressure us into conceding, I always think we'll win.
Well, good luck to you and all the other protesters out there today. Andre, thank you so much for your time.
In an email, the university provost said Columbia is committed to a constructive mediation process with the goal of reaching an agreement as soon as possible.
With the holidays fast approaching, the supply chain shortage is causing gift holdups, but we haven't considered how this disruption affects our youngest generation. One elementary school in Washington Heights is short on lunch trays. Elena Torek reports.
Principal of Castlebridge Elementary, Julie Zuckerman, was about to retire when she heard the news. Her school's cafeteria was running low on aluminum lunch trays.
We were scrambling. It was like, you're kidding me. Yet again, another last-minute thing that we have to go through.
She already changed school lunch service in September for COVID safety. To socially distance, all students ate outside. Staff members would bring the trays of hot lunch out to students.
We just don't have the space to have them all inside. We had 200 kids eating in a public playground.
But now, imagine bringing hot lunch outside without trays, balancing fruit cups and quesadillas on flimsy pizza boxes and styrofoam plates. It wouldn't work. Zuckerman decided to encourage parents to pack home lunches for their students.
And there were certainly parents who jumped up and wanted to immediately figure out if they could buy some kind of trays. But no, this is a system-wide thing. This is not something where we're going to go to Best Buy or Costco and take care of her.
But not all Castlebridge parents can afford to pack a lunch. A ways downtown on 116th, Lily, a single mom and Castlebridge parent between jobs, is grocery shopping for her daughter's home lunch. She relies on food assistance, making it hard to provide an extra meal for her child.
There's a lot of issues that are being caused by the pandemic still that are affecting kids in school, right? You don't think that the supply chain issue affects 5-year-olds, but it does.
I understand where the principal's coming from, but I think it's short-sighted.
That's Dr. Jen Cadenhead, a researcher in food trauma at Columbia University. She says encouraging parents to pack home lunches creates a class divide.
It reveals the power that the principal has in making decisions over where the school serves the food. I would encourage that principal to think prioritizing nutrition for the child is every bit as important as instructional learning.
Over 2/3 of New York's public school children rely on free lunch. The lack of trays fits into the broader supply chain issue affecting food security for New York students. And Dr. Cadenhead is seeing a miscommunication between angry parents and school lunch providers.
I don't think that parents are completely aware that the reason why their child isn't getting maybe a chicken breast is because, one, it's too expensive, and two, the paper that goes in between the two pieces of chicken to keep them from sticking together is no longer available because that's stuck in a container out in the port in Los Angeles.
Dr. Cadenhead said it's not just Castlebridge Elementary.
I've talked to school food leaders across the nation, and they are saying exactly the same thing that's happening in New York City. I think the government needs to take a really close look at what's happening and why, and recognize that our food system is broken. They need to step in and be able to provide more funding, more support, maybe even more direct food for schools.
The question remains, How is the government going to fill the gap between supply chain scarcity and school lunches? Elena Torek, Uptown Radio News.
Every year, an average of 80 people die at subway and train stations in New York City. Some are pushed to the rail by others, and some commit suicide by jumping onto the tracks. This has many riders asking, what can be done to make the underground safer? Soo-Min Kim reports.
Recently, a woman at the 42nd Street subway station got pushed towards a moving train by a homeless man. She was transferred to the hospital with bloody injuries on her head. Victoria Zhuang, who commutes to school by train every day, is disturbed by the incident.
I think that's horrifying. It could have been me, it could have been you. Assume I'm getting pushed. What do I do?
Another rider, Nicole Droy, did not want to dwell on it.
I know I've heard of it happening. I just try to keep it out of my mind when I'm in here.
Being pushed isn't the only horrific thing that can happen at the train station. Katie Stoll is an assistant at the Long Island Crisis Center.
Every so often we do get a call from somebody who is at a train station or who received our number from a train station, but people do commit suicide by jumping in front of a train.
It happened so often that the Crisis Center started to work with the transit agency.
We partnered with the MTA to put up posters with our phone number at Long Island Railroad stations across Nassau, Suffolk, and to Queens. If you are in crisis, if you're thinking about suicide, please give this number a call, and it connected people to our specially trained counselors.
Katie Stoll says they are getting 50 to 70 calls a day. So the outreach is doing something, but there may be a more effective way to prevent both accidents and suicides. Building a protective plexiglass wall so that no one can reach the tracks. This is done in many countries with global cities, such as France, Korea, and Canada. And consultants have recommended protective barriers for the New York City subway system. But Stoll from Long Island Crisis Center isn't convinced.
It's an interesting idea. I think it would make the train platforms feel very claustrophobic. And quite honestly, I think that if people wanted to jump in front of a train, they would find a way to get over that wall.
And even if you could convince everyone it's a good idea, who would pay for it? Andre Berman is a spokesperson for the MTA.
It's not like a bridge where you just put it up at like one bridge, right? Protective barriers at every platform would be billions of dollars.
Berman also says there is a political issue.
So every year when you have a certain amount of money you can spend on major capital projects, and right now it's about $50 billion, and a whole range of interests who are competing for things from that finite pool of money. It can be very political.
But Berman says it's not impossible. He points to new elevators in the subway.
Groups that have been advocating for folks with disabilities did a really good job advocating and making sure that the powers that be. So now we're building 100 elevators.
It took decades and pressure from disability activists, but it's finally happening. He says maybe someday, if enough people bring the pressure, protective barriers will happen here. Soo-Min Kim, Uptown Radio News.
Modeling agencies often search for a specific look, turning away models based on their weight, height, and size. It's been the topic of what's now known as Model TikTok, where models share videos of their lives in the business. One college student in New Jersey is working to change the industry's culture, one DM at a time. Kanaya Rogers reports.
In a cafe in Times Square, New York, customers chatter over piping hot cups of coffee and glazed pastries. There, I met with Vanessa Moyes, a senior criminology student at Rutgers University and owner of model management company Jamila Rain Models. This year, she started JRM, where she helps connect models with photographers, castings, and gigs. Growing up, Vanessa never saw anyone in magazines or on billboards who looked the way she did.
So I want to kind of break that and to show that every type of ethnicity is beautiful and every type of body shape, person is beautiful in their own way.
All the work Vanessa does is through Instagram. She posts photo shoots with the models she manages on the business's page. With a quick tap, the portfolios of models of all shapes, colors, and sizes are available for agencies to see. offering more than the one set of features and body type that she's seen industry professionals praise.
So I really wanted to create a diverse place for models to be, and also so they can feel comfortable, so that they can have a safe place to come while succeeding in their career.
Sitting beside her is a model who knows this firsthand. Caitlin DeLisi is also a student at Rutgers, and she joined JRM because she's been sidelined from castings for not having a certain look.
They're always looking for those really tall, blonde, skinny girls that are like a size 00. And I am not that. I am a size 12 to 14, which is mid-size modeling. And thankfully, I have found like a community within mid-size modeling, especially at JRM.
Caitlin says that, at times, feedback from agents has negatively impacted her mental health. But she's feeling more optimistic since she joined JRM.
Vanessa like sticks up for us, like she knows like what she's doing and she actually cares, which is really nice.
Like Vanessa, Marie P. Anderson owns a model management company, Boss Babe Models, where she helps models get signed to big agencies. Anderson is an industry expert and former model with over 30 years of experience. She quit modeling because of the pressure she felt to attain unrealistic beauty standards.
I was constantly being told that I needed to take an inch or two off my hips. And I just grew tired of hearing, Marie, you're just not good enough.
Behind the glitz and glam, she says models are vulnerable.
What people don't understand is how unregulated our industry is, and how there's a lot of people in the position of power that have issues, and they're not concerned about the mental health of others around them.
Marie's certain, however, that positive energy and unity can be nothing short of transformative.
Anybody who's working with the intention to empower people instead of oppressing people is a significant individual creating change. So it's imperative that I think as a community overall, we have to work together.
And working together is exactly what Vanessa intends for Jamila Rain Models. As JRM grows, she hopes to continue spreading acceptance and inclusivity. Kanaya Rogers, Uptown Radio.
You're listening to Uptown Radio. I'm Emily Russell.
And I'm Teja Palikonda. As remote learning continues to be the norm for city college students, enrollment has taken a hit.
I was all lost and I did so terrible in all of my classes because I was feeling like I'm drowning in the middle of a sea.
Neighborhood comes together to rehabilitate its park after it was ignored by the city for far too long.
Full of garbage and debris and bottles, and people were just throwing things along.
These stories and more coming up next. This is Uptown Radio. I'm Teja Palikonda.
And I'm Emily Russell. Just before 11 p.m. on December 2nd, a grad student at Columbia University was stabbed to death while crossing the northern tip of Morningside Park. 15 minutes later, another student was stabbed, this time at the opposite end of the park. And 2 years ago, a Barnard student was also stabbed to death in that same park.
The university recently announced enhanced security measures in conjunction with the NYPD throughout the park and Morningside Heights.
Dave Robinson is an executive committee member of the Morningside Heights Community Coalition. I asked him if he felt in this instance that the safety interests of the university align with the rest of the neighborhoods.
In most respects, yes, the safety interests coincide because we're all interested in staying safe and being protected from random violence. There are different concerns that Columbia might have than the neighborhood might have, in the sense that Columbia's main concern has been with protecting students and affiliates of Columbia, which makes sense. That isn't always the same as protecting people that live in the neighborhood. People are struggling to survive there. They see the contrast between, this wealthy university with tuition much higher than people's annual income. It creates tension, and I don't know that Columbia always plays the best role in resolving it.
Specifically now, I'm thinking the university announced that there's going to be 24/7 police patrolling of the neighborhood, especially around the park. How do you think that might affect or infringe upon the lives of the other Morningside Heights residents?
There is that concern. That concern came up 2 years ago. It will come up again, and it is getting a balance The worry, I think, is that there are incidents in which people from the neighborhood, especially young people of color, are bothered by police in a way that they shouldn't be. The more police they are, the greater the chances of that happening.
Do you feel that Columbia University students in particular are being targeted in these violent acts? Is there anything that Columbia students should be doing to not be targets? Or do you even see them as targets at all?
That is a really good question. What happened the other night could have happened to anyone in the neighborhood. Morningside Park in particular was honestly very poorly designed for safety. You're walking in their little hidden curves where you can't see what's coming around the curve. So people should certainly be really, really careful. I don't know if I were coming back from someplace really late at night that I wouldn't walk around the park.
Dave, last question. What is your hopes for the neighborhood?
My hopes for the neighborhood would be more justice in the neighborhood. So my vision would be people coming together to work on problems and making better schools, safer parks, more housing that is affordable to more people, and the students are a really important part of that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dave. We really appreciate your time and your insight.
The pandemic has been especially hard on the city's public colleges. Enrollment in City College is down 10% from a couple years ago. This is a bit of a mystery since enrollment is up at places like Columbia and NYU. Liz Brewer took a look at this issue and what City College is doing about it.
City College has always been one of those places where there are hundreds of kids on the quad. But last March, the pandemic sent everyone home. Other schools, such as Yeshiva University, went to be in person this semester, but City College did not. They are still online and have been losing 5% of their enrollment each year of the pandemic. School officials admit that they didn't do a good job of keeping students engaged during remote learning.
Been a very in-person campus. We had not done a whole lot of development of online course offerings.
That's English professor and interim dean of arts and humanities at City College, Dr. Renata Kobetz-Miller.
And so that required a major shift for our faculty and our students, none of whom were really equipped with the sort of technology at home to be able to do that with ease.
And so for the students, going to City College became a frustrating experience. Sophomore psych major Aisha says she understands why some students dropped out.
It was terrible. I was all lost and I did so terrible in all of my classes because I was feeling like I'm drowning in the middle of a sea. It was crazy.
City College sophomore Tiffany said help wasn't there either.
It was very discouraging as a student, starting college as a freshman, especially because it's a new experience, right? College, and being in the middle of a pandemic is even worse. And being stuck in your room most of the time, it's very depressive to you. Yeah.
City College also is accommodating students' varying vaccination levels and comfortability with traveling to campus, which the dean said has led to a hiccup to returning in person.
And I will say we have students who are vaccinated, we have students who are unvaccinated, we have students of different levels of comfort coming to campus. Most of our students commute to campus using public transportation, and so there are various levels of comfort about commuting around New York with the pandemic still. And so we are still, I think, the 70-30 split of in-person and hybrid or online courses for the spring. Really kind of demonstrates that we're going to continue to serve students who are still looking for an online experience, although our focus is going to be on returning to in-person as much as possible.
Every student that I talked to said that the school needs to do something, and quick, before it loses all its students. Dr. Kobetz-Miller, the dean, said they are working on a number of ideas to lure students back. The first thing they need to do is get back in person. In the meantime, they are also doing...
We have a food pantry that stayed open throughout the pandemic. We've provided emergency grants for students to cover unexpected expenses such as medical expenses or rent or housing costs, technical equipment for classes, costs for childcare during the pandemic. And City University distributed $118 million of federal relief funds directly to over 197 1,000 students during the pandemic.
Getting those students back matters to the whole city, as students who opt out of higher education might experience a lifetime of lower wages. City College is the oldest and most prestigious of the CUNY system. Let's hope it stays that way. Liz Brewer, Uptown Radio News.
During the pandemic, some parks rarely saw city maintenance. In Washington Heights, the neighborhood came together and decided to clean their local park. Now, it's full of giant birdhouses. Sunny Bean went to see how the birds are faring in their new homes.
I met Julio at 161st and Riverside, by the birdhouses.
Hi, how are you?
He's charismatic, with a kind face.
Julio Pareda is my name, but no one knows me here by Julio Pareda. Everybody knows me by Juice.
He's in charge these days. He's been on the block 45 years, and he loves it, but it's empty, residential.
You gotta understand something. This is not downtown. So the sweepers don't come around here all the time.
He shows me their green space, a slope over the Hudson, but there's traffic to New Jersey in between.
This was full of garbage and debris and bottles, and people were just throwing things along.
It was gross.
The rats down there. I'm not playing.
Julio tried different projects. He planted tomatoes and flowers in the street.
And old ladies would come by and scoop my flower up and the whole thing. You know, say, hey, I planted that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Neighbors started to talk. They wanted somewhere to go, something to look at. Someone came up with it. Birdhouses. Big ones. It takes 5 men to lift the main house onto a grocery cart. Each house has a front porch, twirling pillars, fixed with more layers of ever smaller birdhouses. They connect with long wooden bridges draped between the trees. They got approval from the city, the Parks Department.
We paid certain people that were out here. We do the cleanup for us.
Neighbors used the skills they had, and now it's the spot. People come after work for Halloween and fireworks. It has an orbit, a feeling that you're right here.
You want to come in here? You can come in.
I met Justin Davis here after work.
I came here in the very beginning of when there was nobody in the street.
He's an ICU nurse. During the pandemic, he's been away from his family in Pittsburgh to work at New York Presbyterian Hospital. He's been around the block.
162nd, 161st, 160th, 159th, 177th.
He settled on 161st.
But, we got this cool squirrel thingamajigger / birdhouse behind us. And before you know it, everyone finally gets to know me. It rolled like a snowball. I kind of feel like I'm coming home.
Over the pandemic, the birdhouse warped and rotted. Today, a dozen neighbors work on major renovations.
That's Juan, that's Giordani, that's Chino, that's...
Volunteers drill, sand, and fix solar panel lights. Julio's the one who makes things happen.
Might call me sort of a little pushy at times, but I have to make things happen. I cannot sleep on anything.
The new houses have dancing rainbow lights, making it look more like a nightclub than a birdhouse. Protecting the corner is an ongoing process.
You see that black thing there? I painted it over, but somebody graffitied my pumpkin.
And as for any bird visitors...
If they do, and they happen to occupy, it's squatters' rights.
But Julio doesn't really care.
We're not able to, fix everything that's going on, but we are able to just take care of this little piece that we kind of call home.
He'll keep looking after the block. This is Sunny Bean for Uptown Radio News.
Well, that does it for this edition of Uptown Radio. We hope you enjoyed the show.
Our foreman today was executive producer Liz Brewer. Leading our staff of reporters, senior producer Sunny Bean, and producer Kanaya Rogers, who also got this stream live to the web.
Director Elena Torek coordinated our studio production with James In and Soo-Min Kim.
Will Norris produced the news. Senior editor Marco Shodden led our copy team.
Our instructors Robert Smith and Gilda DeCarli advised our staff. I'm Teja Palikonda.
And I'm Emily Russell. Until next time, you can always find us on uptownradio.org. From all of us here at Uptown Radio, thanks for listening.